Happy New Year!
Oh my God, that was loud.
It scared me.
Anyway, Happy New Year's, everybody. Welcome to Got Somme, our New Year special. Now, I said to Carlos, we went into Dan's and I said, you've got $100 as a person from the old world. Pick a champagne that isn't, no disrespect to, and please tell me I'm saying this right, Moet.
Moet Chandon.
And then, of course, Mum is another big one.
Mum, yeah.
And another big one is...
For you guys would be...
What? Mum, and what's the other one?
Veuve Clicquot, yeah.
But yes, we didn't want to go for the typical champagnes that you most typically will find at every single bottle shop. So Carlos, given a budget of $100, picked a bottle of champagne that is $99.99.
I was going to do it professionally, nice little cut, but...
Do it as nice as you can, yeah. There's a tear. Are you going to let it pop?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna pop it to the corner there because I can see. I already studied the room, like where is no.
Don't hit the fire.
That corner there is perfect.
Don't hit that thing. Yeah.
Oh, if he hits that thing, we're gonna have I wish it was a champagne shower, but it's not gonna be a champagne shower. It's gonna be a water shower. It's not as interesting.
Towards this corner.
Go, baby. You scared?
No, I'm ready.
Whoa, perfect. That was really good. Yeah.
Explain why this took your attention.
Because this is Charles Heidsieck. So, very cool story about Charles Heidsieck. Charles Heidsieck was apparently a very, very flamboyant man. He would go from Champagne into New York and really, really well dressed. He would go to every, socialite party. And he would just be very, very, very well connected in New York. But then again, this is back at these times, 200 years ago or more. And he would, every time he would go to New York, he would bring bottles of champagne with him. So of course, people loved him back then there. And that's when, Charles Heidsieck actually became famous as a producer. At some stage, he got really, really big. It was a lot less interesting. But recently, they just kind of reformed the whole production and winery, etc., to something really, really good. And that's why I really like it right now. This one is the Brut Reserve, which means that 50% of the wines, at least, are reserve wines. And that's a lot of complexity, and you can smell that. It's not your Moet Chandon, it's not a Veuve Clicquot. I mean, I'm sorry to put those names down, to drop those names, but when you smell this,
the brioche.
Yeah, that's crazy insane.
Yeast.
Yeah. So as a minimum of 6 years only, something that is aging for 6 years when it's put together, that is made from reserve wines, a minimum of 50%. That's expensive to make because if you just have something from the year that you harvest, that you age for 12 months, which is the minimum required. Well, actually 9 months on lease plus 3 months on bottle before you can release champagne for a known vintage. And Moet Chandon will not do more than that. I mean, again, name dropping. Sorry. And that's why they're able to produce every single year, 40 million bottles. With this one, there's nowhere near that amount of production. Impossible. Number one, because they don't buy the same amount of grapes. Number two, because they don't have the storage to store that many bottles of wine. And number three, because they would never have access to that many reserve wines. So it's really, really good.
You were saying that variation in vintage is what you love.
So if you have a vintage champagne, and that's why vintage champagne is more expensive, because you are making something out of that year that is not going to go into a reserve wine that one day will go into this bottle. But for these wines, for Charles Heidsieck, as it is for Krug, and there's some sort of Krug note in this wine, which okay, I don't want to compare too much. But there's some sort of Krug note in this wine, and that is the reserve wine, that is the aged wine that is well matured and that is exposed to a little oxygen, which gives another, much broader, a much more complex, much more mushroomy and truffle. He actually smells like white truffle, which is really, really nice in champagne. And you don't get that by doing bare minimum aging and then again, but with Moet and Veuve Clicquot, as you said, and very well, and yes, I do remember saying that is that they need something that is consistent.
Consistency is so important because people just want the same thing.
100%, but that's why Moët & Chandon does so well, and Veuve Clicquot, and that's why they're so successful brands. Well, number one is marketing. They really good, and they invest a whole lot of money on it.
And you're selling 40 million bottles, you can.
A proper shed load of it. That's right.
Shed load.
You know, so they can afford to buy grapes from, you know, I don't know, thousands of producers, and they just have this consistent, good fruit coming for the sparkling wine, for the champagne. Of course, it takes merit from the smaller growers because it's much harder to compete, because it's just very, very hard to compete for these guys.
Quickly, and I mean quickly, if you can. We have done this before, but it was a Patreon exclusive. I think it was on our Instagram as well. I will tag that into our stories over the next 2 days. So if you are watching this around New Year's, check our stories, watch that video. But do you want to explain NV?
Yeah.
CV?
Sure. So NM means négociant manipulant, and that means that the producer will own a very small amount of the vineyards of the wine they produce, meaning they will buy a lot of grapes, a lot of juice from everywhere on the surroundings in Champagne. While récoltant manipulant, RM, when you look for a bottle of champagne, if you find RM, that will typically be incredibly small production, usually by the thousands of bottles, like a couple of, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, etc. And that, when you compare to 40 million, that's tiny. That's really, really, really tiny. Producers like this, they would typically sell to the huge house, to the huge producers like the NM ones. But then they decided, they thought like, well, wait a second. We have this really high quality fruit. We have such an amazing produce that we can make great champagne ourselves. Why are we selling these grapes? So they decided to make their own wine and bottle their own wine under their own label, and that's what's called the RM, récoltant manipulant, and that's typically much more diversity, much more volatile, if you like, in quality, if you can say that. But I do think that they are much more interesting champagnes because you actually get a sense of terroir, a sense of vintage, a sense of the producer.
And the year.
And the year.
A little bit of history.
Yeah, and a little bit of history, because every single year, every single bottle will be slightly different every year because they're so small. It's much more wine like anywhere around the world. While, NM, négociant manipulant, every year will be so similar because they have these stocks of wine year after year that they blend and blend and blend and blend.
Yeah, they get the blend right until it tastes like the same.
That's right, every single year. Yeah, that's why they're so consistent, but so different as well. This is somewhere in between kind of thing. But very consistent, really good, and I think at $99 is a great offer, to be honest.
There you go.
Yeah.
So if you're going to pop a bottle of champagne tomorrow at midnight, or today midnight, yesterday at midnight, maybe it's kick-ons, then this is what a master sommelier suggests. Under $100 at Dan Murphy's. You will see a little bit of a heads up to what's coming up for Got Somme. We will be back in late January, but we do have a secret episode for you, a episode that we did record, but just didn't make the schedule. But basically, because we did it a couple of months ago, we recorded an episode of a secret wine tasting, a blind tasting for Carlos, and the wine was Goon. In your subscription, to keep us in your podcast subscriptions, we are still releasing content before we return for season 2. So expect in early January, the Goon episode, which is really funny. And then we have our trailer for season 2 coming, and then we'll be back late Jan, early Feb with what season 2 looks like. But until then, thank you so much for the year that was.